Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name is Pat, and boy, am I glad I'm an Al-Anon. Certain days more than others. That's just one of those days. It's wonderful to be here. Always is. I look out and I just see all these people I know and all these old faces. That's not what I mean, but they are. And it's just wonderful. I notice on the program it says this meeting goes till 6:30. I promise you, I'm not going to do that to you. I could. I got taught well when I first came in here, and that's just sit down when I'm supposed to. And if I haven't said what I need to say in an hour or 45 minutes, whatever it is, then that's not worth hearing anymore. And I find that's true of me when I'm sitting out there, too. I just quit listening after a certain point. And I want to listen. Well, and I say I'm so glad I'm an Al-Anon, and sometimes more than others, but overall, I'm always grateful. Even when I don't want to go to a meeting, or I go to a meeting and everybody's really dumb, you know, or they're all not paying attention, and you know, you want them to shape up, and I still am grateful. And it took me a while. It took me a while to get to that point. At first, I came to Al-Anon really to help you. And does that sound like a good I know some of you probably relate to that. My husband, by the way, I'll introduce him. His name is Cliff, and if he can stand up, I'll ask him to. He needs, oh, there you go. Now you know why I married him, huh? I really married him because he could sing like Donald Duck. Wouldn't you? That's true, by the way. Oops. But thank you for inviting him to come along, and now we get to hear some of the other speakers and the people we know and love in this program, and that's a special treat. And the people on the committee that have been contacting me, email a lot of it, have been so efficient, I felt like I was trying to catch up. Everybody was so good at it, and I appreciate that too. That's not always the case. Some of you know maybe, you get, you know, somebody calls you and then you don't hear from them again until they say, well, are you coming tomorrow? Where? But it's wonderful to be here, and of course in Orange County, we're from Oceanside, which isn't that far away, and so we know a lot of you. And I go to a meeting in Laguna Beach every Monday, and because that's kind of where I started years ago, 40 years ago actually, and so I've just kind of connect with the Orange County people too, as well as San Diego County, so I've had the best of both worlds. So anyway, Cliff had gone into AA one more time, you know, whoopee, and some of you have experienced that, and you know, every time you'd go in, we're all supposed to just be, oh, we're so glad. Well, we'd kind of worn out of that, you know, and all we did was just say, okay, go right ahead. And this time, well, he got busier, let's put it that way. He wasn't coming home and complaining as much and telling me how stupid the AA members were. And what had happened is he had gotten a sponsor immediately. He decided he needed to go back. Well, he wasn't sleeping in the big bed anymore. That was probably a little bit motivating, I guess. And in fact, he wasn't even in the house anymore. And that was different. And we'd been married 20 years by then, and that was different. We'd had our little ups and downs, of course, but it was not usual thing for him to be somewhere else. And that happened because he, one more time, said his lines. Any of you who have spouses or people in your life that you just know what they're going to say next, His line was, well, I just met her move out, because I'd obviously been complaining. And my line was, oh, that's no way to solve problems. We have to talk about them. And what happened was he said it one more time, and I said, good idea. Surprised me when I said it, too. I had no idea I was going to say that. And I was not an Al-Anon, so I'll just credit whatever power came to me, I'll just be fine with that, but because I needed the help. And then, as he puts it, he had to, for his pride, he had to move out. He said he was going to. And then we all discovered how wonderful it was to have him gone. And, you know, sometimes you don't realize it. And I would be driving towards the house and kind of going down the hill towards our house, and I'd realize his car wasn't in the driveway, and I'd think, oh, he doesn't live there. And I'd recognize that my stomach didn't ache anymore. Every time I drove home, saw the car, I'd get this tight thing in my stomach. And when it wasn't there, I realized I'd been getting it all that time. I hadn't even known it. There it was. So you see, it was kind of nice at home, and we really kind of, we just kind of liked it. But he was going to AA all the time. And his little sponsor lived around the corner. His name was Bill Blake, and I don't know if there's anybody here in the program long enough to know Bill, to have known Bill. I think he's been dead about 20 years, hasn't he? But what a character. I mean, that is not the kind of person I wanted him to get involved with, I'll tell you. Oh, he was a little electrician, and he moved like a little bandy rooster, and he lived around the corner, which was really inconvenient for me, and he'd come walking in my front door, uninvited, no knock, no doorbell. Well, we couldn't ring the doorbell. There was a little episode around the doorbell, so it didn't work. But, you know what our houses are like. There's some things that just don't work anymore. And he'd just come walking in and scare me. And he'd say, sit down, I want to talk to you. And I was courteous, and I'd sit down, and he'd say, you need to go to this thing, it's Al-Anon, you need to go to this. And I'd look at those things he was handing me, and I'd take them politely and say thank you. And I'd give them to my next door neighbor who really needed them. Yeah. You see, I really thought I had these solutions. A couple reasons for that. One, I'd been a psychology major. Does you no good. It's not, I mean, unless you want to use the books to toss at him, it's really helpless. And we had met in college, and it's very natural, by the way, for a psych major to hook up with a drama major. You know, the rocks on the head and the holes in the other one. And it just fits. So that's no surprise to us. Other people look puzzled, but it was no surprise to us, is it? And so Bill would do that, and I would be irritated. And then he would say, well, at least come to some of the AA meetings with us, because he was driving Cliff all over the place. All the way, really all over, clear up to Venice, California, and that was his sponsor, lived there. And that was weird, because I went, partly because I'm a good wife, and I always joined the auxiliaries of anything he belonged to. And it was a good way for me to figure out what on earth he was doing with these people. No, I didn't have any knowledge of AA, really. It hadn't worked before for him. It hadn't worked. What an unfair thing to say. Of course, he hadn't done it. But to me, it hadn't worked. And then Bill had a wife named Margie, who was also a sober member of AA. I don't know if anybody knew her. Wonderful woman. She's the one that kind of, I think, helped me to recognize that I needed something for myself. And of course, she was right there around the corner, and I would run around the corner and knock on her door and go in, and I'd say, oh my God, I'd be all upset about him, and I'd carry on. And Margie, being a very calm alcoholic, sober quite a few years, she'd just listen to me, and then she'd say, Pat, you have to trust. I said, trust? I can't trust him. And she said, not him, I mean God. She said, I don't trust him either. And it helped, it really helped. So she was a big help to me. And I went to the AA meeting, some of them. I wasn't that impressed. The one person we heard who was early on, and this is 40 years ago now, was Chuck C. And he, everybody, looked up and there's like supposed to be a light behind him. And I didn't think he was all that great because, listen to his tapes. He says something nice and he goes, hee, 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 hee. And, any trained speaker knows better than to do that. So, you can hear where I was coming from. But I did come to, by the way, appreciate him and his wife. But not then I didn't. I didn't like Clancy. We were in his backyard and Cliff introduced me to him as that he found me in a gutter waiting for an alcoholic to come along and abuse me, the old joke. But all Clancy did was he pulled down my blouse and said, "Oh, lace." I didn't slap him, but boy, my hand was just tingling to do that. Now, I want to tell you this. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs, but I'm very good friends with him. Appreciate him for who he is and recognize the things that I can leave. But he really, I know him well and I like him, but I couldn't like those people back there. I couldn't respect them and you and any alcoholics in the room. My apologies. But, those of us that come into Al-Anon are pretty sick. And we can't allow you, I think a lot of us, to be okay and to appreciate the sobriety or appreciate the efforts you're going to. Because then where does that leave us, Took me a long time to figure that one out, too. So I was very fortunate. Margie put me in her car and drove me to Laguna Beach, noon Al-Anon. And Elsa had started that, and that is where I got my basic roots. Not that I didn't go to a meeting in Oceanside. It was just a little unpredictable there at that time. We called it a meeting and a half. There was one you could pretty well depend on happening, and one that half the time somebody was there and half the time they weren't. But it was a group they were trying, and now they're all over the place. But she felt like I needed to have more than that. It wasn't that generous of her to drive me from Oceanside all the time complaining, all the time, and take me up to meet those experienced Al-Anon people. And I did appreciate that at the time. I seemed to recognize somewhere that this woman's going out of her way. And I learned to really recognize later what a valuable gift she'd given me. And she didn't have to do that. She had AA people to work with, but she did. And actually, I think she just wanted to get me off of her hands. And she was right. So I began going to meetings. Of course, sitting in an AA meeting for an Al-Anon when you're new and he's new it's a tough thing to do because, for one thing, the alcoholics laugh at stuff that is awful. Not funny. And, we can't do a thing about it. We're at an AA meeting, they won't let us talk. And, and some of you have done that. You must shh, listen. So I had a little trouble with that. I did the thing a lot of us do, and that is see what step he's working and try to look over his shoulder what he's reading and, to find out how he's doing in his program. But I had been also taken up to, as I said, Venice, and I met a lady up there named Sally Carpenter, and she became my first sponsor now. She was great because if any of you know her, she's living up in Seattle now, but no nonsense, no complications. And of course, I complicate because I analyze. I mean, that's what you do when you're a psych major, you analyze. And I think I was doing that when I was 2 years old, to tell you the truth, which is probably why I went into psychology. And Sally was great. But she lived in Tarzana. We lived in Oceanside, that's 100 and some miles. And after a few years, I began recognizing how much work I had to do. Not for him, for me. It became clear that I needed somebody close by, and so I found somebody in the San Diego area that sponsored me for some years. And then some things changed there, and I've been going to Laguna all that time, so the next sponsor I had, and I still have today, is Karen Ackerlin, who's, we just kind of stumble around together now and bump into each other, and, both of us well over 80, and it's just wonderful to have a friend like that, and that's been another gift. So I've been very fortunate in the people that I've had for sponsors, very, very fortunate, and I'm grateful for that too. I didn't always mind them, but Sally particularly used to say to me, you need to watch what you're saying. Now, you watch your tongue when you're talking to Cliff, and how we think, how does she know? I hear that all the time. How do you know that? You know, and the thing is that, you know, he was a stinker when he got sober. Well, he was that drunk too, but I expected him to shape up. And actually, the first year or two, he was worse sometimes. My kids used to say, "Get him a drink," you know. It was a while for me to understand what a struggle that is for an alcoholic to go through sobriety, the first part of it. I had no appreciation for that. And so he was supposed to shape up, and it seemed to me he was worse. Well, he was. Of course, he had no buffer. He had no relief. And what he was getting was helping, but it wasn't all there yet. Eventually, of course, the strength and the wonderful AA program really started to bloom in him, and I'm very grateful for that, for his sake more than for mine, really. And so I wasn't all that interested in how he was doing anyway, because it's getting troublesome, because he was so angry a lot of the time. And he talks about that. I won't say anything here that he doesn't say. Well, it might slip out. There might be something, but I'm not guarding myself, let's put it that way. And so Sally had been kind of nudging me and trying to get into how I was behaving. And what I would always say, well, yeah, Sally, if you heard him, if you could hear him, well, you know, you'd know why I have to say what I say. She said, nevertheless, don't you hate that? Nevertheless, you need to apologize when you've spoken badly to him. And I'm saying the things we say. I'm not going to let him off the hook. He starts it. I mean, you should hear him. You're going to think it's okay. She said, just do it. There's another one. Just do it. Don't analyze it. And of course, I respected Sally, and I wanted to please her and get my gold star, whatever you get. And so the day came, of course, when we had another argument, of course. And this time, I really was not so nice. I was just disgusted. And I walked out of the room, and I stood there. I thought, oh, geez, I probably apologize to this guy. I'm supposed to do that. And I'm trying to think how, and I thought, well, I guess I didn't have to talk about the shanty Irish. And probably didn't have to make reference to his mother, because I'd never met her. She died before I met him. Probably could have left that out, you know, and could have left out his drunken sister, and there were a few kinds of things, you know. So I went back in to apologize, and I couldn't get the apology going in about the exact things I'd said, so here's what I said. I want to apologize to you, Cliff, for the way I reacted to your childish and immature outburst. I was proud. I was very proud of that, and I can't really remember the expression on his face. I can only imagine. He probably just sat there, all right, you know, because I was proud, and I called Sally, told her what I'd said, and it was a long silence on the phone. I do recall that, and then she said, "Well, honey, that's a start." But there's where I was coming from, you see. I couldn't see my part in things, and I didn't want to let him off the hook, and it felt to me like if I did my life in a better way and didn't make sure he recognized all the ways he'd affected this family, make sure he felt guilty, that somehow he was going to get away with something. It takes a while sometimes. I don't think I'm the only one that. And, you know, I guess that's called anger, resentment. It's called a lot of things. If you'd asked me if I was angry, I would have said no, because I really didn't let that part come out. Oh, of course I was. But, you know, you can express anger in a lot of ways, come around slippery sides and sneak in from the back and surprise people. And so, of course, I was angry. Little by little, I came to recognize that anger was, a lot of it was based on fear. We have 5 children, much to our surprise. And so obviously we got along some of the time. And they're great kids, by the way. Of course, they're grown. Great kids. I don't know how they made it through. All 5 of them have grown up to be wonderful people. 3 of them are in Alcoholics Anonymous, as well they should be. And we're grateful for that. One's an Al-Anon, and the other one doesn't need it. She was 7 years old when we got here, and she's absorbed enough and is so familiar with the steps of this program that she's used them very well in her life. But you know, and I don't know, they did that themselves, because I was so absorbed with him, not only when he was drinking, but when we got into sobriety and all these things were happening, I was still leaving them more than I should have. Leaving the 12-year-old in charge of the others, and she was too young to do that. She knew that I couldn't stop him from driving drunk, and she knew I got in the car with him. And I'm not proud of that one, I'll tell you. And I'd come home, and she'd be sitting there scared and say, I was scared, I heard sirens. And I would say, oh, don't worry about it. And I wouldn't even give her a chance to express how frightening that must have been for her, to know that we were in a car with a drunk driving and she's hearing sirens. I didn't even acknowledge that she had reasons to be scared. Obviously, since then, we've had long talks about that. But I was so focused on him and so I believed somehow that if we could get peace at any price, everything can be okay. Now, peace at any price in our house meant not anybody getting upset about anything. I've changed that way, by the way. A crisis is very valuable sometimes. Didn't like to think that at first, but it really kind of solves a lot of problems when something just explodes and everybody gets upset and you just let it happen. It's surprising how that helps, but not then, I wouldn't. So peace at any price meant keeping everybody shaped up. That is not easy when you have 5 kids, and some of their friends were a little troublesome. We were a very open-door house. We lived on a street corner in Oceanside, and he was teaching at the high school, and everybody knew us, and we were just wide open, and the kids would come and go in and out the house, and I was given piano lessons by then to make some money, for God's sakes. We needed to have money. And so there we were. I was trying to run a dignified piano studio in my living room, and meanwhile, in the back of the house, in the big family room we built on, I guess David was selling pot out the back door about every half hour. Now, my students would come in about every half hour, and his trade would come in about every half hour at the back door, and people were coming and going. And I kind of knew this, but I wasn't too sure what to do about it, and I was busy giving piano lessons and trying to keep a dignified piano studio. I really didn't know how to give piano lessons, by the way. I'd been taught to play the piano, and that's all. But I like kids. And I guess I did all right, because I was giving 37 piano lessons when we came into this program. How do I remember that? Well, of course I remember, because every morning when he went to school, I said, I'm giving 37 piano lessons a week. And I think he probably remembers that too. And on the chest, you have to do it that way. So I'd remember that number all forever, of course, I probably will. And it was hard, because there were noises going on back there that were disturbing. Things were developing in the back of the house that probably weren't the best. Probably needed a little supervision, let's put it that way. Cliff wasn't home that much, even after he got sober, because of his work. It took him away a lot. He coached the speech and debate teams, which is dreadful for other people. I mean, they're smart. And I would drive them, help him. I would help him go to these tournaments, and he'd put 5 of these brilliant debaters in my car. And they all went to Harvard and places like that later, and they all are talking, and they argue the whole time. They just argue with each other. That's what they do all the time, and I'm just sitting there feeling so stupid with these people. And but today I'm grateful. But that was a real sacrifice for me. I did very well with the sacrificing, and I was the varsity martyr, as one of the ladies told me. She gave me a big letter M. I didn't know why. And Varsity Martyr Club, you've got it going. And I was, but it was okay for me to be a martyr, because if you think about it, there's a lot of good. Some people think that's a holy thing to be. Yet I didn't like it when somebody would say to me, "Oh, you're just a saint." I didn't like it, but I was acting like one. Oh, I gave up everything. And a lot of times I could have gotten in trouble. Just the other day, we were talking about a family that disappeared into Mexico. They're from our area, and we don't know what happened to them. And one more time I'm remembering, you see, the doctor, before he got sober, one of the doctors had given him antabuse to try. Everybody know what that is? And because if you drink on antabuse, you get sick. And so that was kind of nice. I liked him having it. Because we at least had some control. So what I went down to the UCSD Medical Library. I had that background. I could read all that stuff. And I looked up antabuse, and I decided I knew what that formula was, how it would work. You're knowing. I didn't know anything. I thought I did. So I figured out that if he and I both knew that he couldn't go a week without drinking, he could never do it. So I figured out a way, if I gave him one on Monday, another one on Tuesday, and a half of one on Wednesday, he could safely drink on Friday without getting sick. Well, I don't know if my formula worked because he never made it till Friday. And he'd drink on Thursday night, and it was not a pretty sight. And he would just get all red blotches, and his breathing would get, and I don't know, I kind of liked it. He'd get all anxious and worried, but now, of course, I realized that could be deadly too. But it was taking me a lot of effort, and I would send him off to school every morning and pop his little pill in his mouth and stroke his throat like you do a dog, make sure they have their ways, And the kids remember that. They say, we never knew why you sent Dad off to school, rubbing his Adam's apple. So I told them the truth. However, the doctor died. So I didn't have a source anymore. And we just live a little ways from Mexico. So this is the sacrifices I went through. This is what I want you to appreciate. So I would put my small child in a car seat, and I would go to Mexico, cross the border with her. Then I would put her in the stroller, and I would go from pharmacy to pharmacy to pharmacy buying antabuse. I didn't want to buy it all in one pharmacy because I didn't want them to know how much I was buying. Alcoholics recognize that because they never bought this. They'd go from liquor store to liquor store. And when first time I heard somebody say that, I said, oh my God, I did the same thing with antabuse. Well, if you've been to Mexico, they really don't care. Nobody's going to care. And then I would have to get it back somehow, so I would buy a piñata. All the Al-Anons are way ahead of me. And, and then I'd put it in the back of the car, it's a station wagon, and here I'm, this is a little child in a station wagon. I'd buy a couple of things that looked like I was supposed to buy them, little pieces of pottery and stuff. And then I would smuggle them back across the border. Well, I would be thinking, this is illegal, and I could get caught, and it would be a federal offense. I could go to jail or prison, and they could take my small child and put her in a shelter. And then I'd think, then he'd recognize how much I'm doing for him. When I was tucking down in Texas one time, they gave me a piñata that's shaped like a chili. It's hanging in my house. But years later, because there was candy in them too, and so years later, we'd find antabuse out in the garage. He was long since stopped taking it, but, it stays around, little pieces of things. So it's we would laugh, remembering those days. But, it's tiring when you do that. My mom came to live with us. Mom had a drinking problem. She was periodic. I wouldn't have known to call it that then. She was great, absolutely great. Even as a drunk, she was great, most of the time. But being a periodic, if any of you have that kind of an alcoholic in your life, can be a little bit confusing because she could go for months without drinking, and she was very comfortable. It didn't bother her. She wasn't white-knuckling it. And then I would come home from school, and I would see the glass with a straw in it, orange juice, and I'd know there was vodka in that. Now, I have no idea why she drank vodka and orange juice through a straw. She didn't drink anything else through a straw. But that was the giveaway. I always knew it. And I don't know what that was about, but AA woman one time told me that you get a better buzz. I doubt it, but but that was, we do this. We learn to read the room when we live with alcoholics. We learn to read and feel what's happening. And that would be my clue right there. And I knew that she'd be drinking for a while. So I didn't bring any friends home. And I knew my dad was going to get very depressed. Good man, felt completely responsible. He was born and raised on a farm in Nebraska, and that's what he learned, that he was the one responsible for his household, and everybody was supposed to be okay. Well, I say she was a good-natured, one of the funniest people I've ever known. Mom was so funny. Well, when I married Cliff, she and he got along just fine. No surprise. She thought he was great. There were only two things she objected to. One was making the kids watch too much TV or something, and the other was not helping fix things enough and not being willing to learn how. Well, nothing about his behavior, nothing about the way he'd smash things around, and of course not, because she drank too. Well, Dad died, and she came to live with us at her request, which was great. I mean, everybody loved Pauline. She was fun. She was a funny little lady. She'd broken her hip, didn't remember how that happened, thought it was odd it hadn't hurt, and was on a walker, and she wouldn't have had to be on a walker, but she wouldn't do the physical therapy the way she did that, like she did drinking. She would go in and learn the exercises. I would take her, and then she'd supposed to do 5 for a few days, and then 10, and she'd do all 50 the first day. And then, of course, she couldn't walk for weeks. So, that was irritating to me and frustrating. And now I understand it. That's the way she did life, too, So that was giving me things to do, too. But she was on her little walker, and she would take little walks around the neighborhood, make friends with people. And, of course, Cliff had a lot of friends from school. The kids had all these friends. And I'm working away giving piano lessons. And I'd finish, finally, and I'd go in the kitchen and then the family room area, and I'd walk in there to finally have something to eat myself, and there'd be all these people, because I'd bake these huge, we didn't have microwaves then, these huge pans full of very nutritious casseroles, very nutritious. My mom was a nutritionist, actually. And then I'd make a huge salad, and all kinds of French bread and stuff, and the neighbors learned, the kids, that was a nice place to come and get food. And they were, by the way, some of my kids and those neighbors got extra hungry. That kind of went along with them smelling kind of musty. So I would come out, and everybody's eating dinner, my dinner, which I expected it to last a few days, when it was gone. And everybody's just having a grand time. They were just feeling fine. And Mom didn't know what they were doing, but she certainly enjoyed it. She had her wine or whatever she wanted and just was right in the groove. And then she may have picked up a little old man here and there. She did that. Well, they came with her. It was like the Pied Piper. People loved her, and she was funny, and she would talk to people as she walked around the blocks and chat with them out in their yards. And this little old man named Mr. Mills, I remember him very well, and she'd invite him over at the house. But I was trying to keep a dignified studio, and I had these drunks, and I had these kids doing what they were doing, and the loud people in the back, and Mom and this man wet his pants all the time. I mean, he always had a little black or dark place in his pants. And it's hard to be dignified. There were times, however, when it was okay, because this is the story of living with an alcoholic, I think. There were times where it was dreadful, and I was feeling sorry for myself, and I was angry, and there were times where it was just great. And one of those times was one day when I was teaching a student to play a little song called Humoresque. Now, you don't have to know music much to know, but it's a dainty little number with quite a little beat. The living room was situated so the one door went into the hallway and the other door went into the dining area. So you could go through the living room and on through the house. And now the students are facing the wall, so to speak, and I'm facing them. Out of one door comes my husband, dressed in a little pair of shorts with little red devils on them, which I had given him, of course. with a rose in his mouth, dancing to the tune of Hubris. Well, how can you be mad at somebody that's doing that? Always just enough. I talk about marrying him because he could. Does everybody else hear that? It's kind of pretty. I'm glad somebody loves you, whoever's getting the call. No, I don't know where I was. Doesn't matter, I guess, whatever. It all goes somewhere. Yeah. I don't know where I was. But mainly I wanted to talk about how I like to laugh with him, and a funny man, and a talented man, and a good man. But there were these funny moments, and that happened before we got married. He would just be so funny that I would love it. I love it. And then one day we were all going somewhere in the car. We were still in college then. And he really did sing like Donald Duck. Anybody old enough to know the Desert Song, which is a kind of an operetta thing. And he was singing it like Donald Duck. It's one of the funniest things I ever heard. And, Al-Anons know that that's a good reason to marry somebody. I laughed one time because I got to thinking about all the ways we use ducks in this program. We're not supposed to call an alcoholic an alcoholic. They're supposed to be able to say that, but like my mother, I can't call her an alcoholic because she didn't say so, but they put walks like a duck and it talks like a duck. And we do that, and sometimes we hear Al-Anons talking about ourselves like ducks who are just skimming across the top of the water, looking so cool, and underneath we're just paddling like hell. But we don't show that. Then there's the Al-Anon man who came into a meeting back in Nebraska, and he felt very good about himself. He said he had his ducks all lined up, and the people in the meeting told him they weren't his ducks. That's one of my favorites. Most of the world are not my ducks, and that's one of the hardest parts for me. But we do, there's a lot of chuckles in here, and there were chuckles and more than chuckles back then. We've just been able to build on that the best we could. We've stumbled through some tough times. Most people do. It's been 40 years in the program. And we had 5 kids and a mom there living there. And now there's going to be, life goes on. And those kids didn't come into AA just tiptoeing through the tulips. They had to do what they had to do to get there. And because of Al-Anon and the help of the really wonderful people that I knew that helped me, I was able to make a whole lot different kind of decisions about those kids than I would have. And that to me was what Al-Anon's about too, choices. I was so trapped in a way of behaving, and then I was given choices. I can stop, I can pause. I don't have to answer something right away. I don't have to, if somebody says, you want to do this, I could say, let me think about it. Instead, I thought I had to know right then. And stalling, that's stalling. And for anybody who wants to know that. And you just stall, that's all. Just politely, but you stall. And then, it's better. It's better somehow. I didn't feel so obligated and put upon. And I was taught one-liners to change my lines. And one of those first things was, we all know this, Max used to say it all the time, you could be right, which is really insulting. Because we've all heard it so many times that we know it means, you're pretty stupid, but I'll tell you, you could be right. We all know that now. That's the trouble, And, but we say it, you could be right. And the other thing that I had to learn to say, and this is through sponsorship, was I don't know. Now, I wasn't able, I had to know everything. And I don't know if anybody relates to that, but if somebody said, where's the ketchup, I had to know. Or where's my keys, I had to know. And other things, of course, anything. And I had to learn to say, I don't know. And I'm looking at my phone here for time. So I'm watching. Well, anyway, the one-liners came in very handy. It was like going to kindergarten. Now, the steps, of course, are the steps, and they are wonderful. I needed, along with them, some little simple behaviors to take, some little pieces of actions that I could do. that probably was taking a step, but it didn't matter what it was called because I had to do it then. I had to change it. Changing my lives was good. When I'd say, I don't know. Now, I had trouble with that one because I really liked knowing. And so I'd say, I don't know, kind of, like that. And that was kind of rude. Then my sponsor suggested I say, gosh, I don't know. Try it. It sounds entirely different. Gosh, I don't know. There's a certain... Now, is that complicated? But that's what I needed. I needed to have the simplest little things to do. And we had played our games, and we still do somewhat, but not as much. It's just too tiring. It's too much work. But, and one of them was, the games I played with him, of course, I knew I could push his buttons, especially with the Shanty Irish thing. That was fun. But my mom was an alcoholic, and she was a sloppy alcoholic when she grew up. We're in my home when I grew up, and later. The house was dirty. She didn't bother with stuff like that. She chased fire engines, and, she just had fun. And, bothering to wash dishes and things, they'll be there. You don't have to do that. Go follow the fire truck. So it was not a comfortable thing to be around that much, really, dirt. And of course I could clean some of it, but we'd go visit. It was hard, and we'd take the kids, and it was kind of hard. And so Cliff could get my goat by coming in. Now I had these 5 kids that I'm giving 37 piano lessons a week. This is after sobriety, and I'm handling this and that and the other thing, and all of our paperwork and all of the the banks and stuff, trying to keep up with all the problems he'd caused in the checkbook, and here I am sacrificing. And the house looked a mess, but it wasn't dirty. It was messy. Sure it was. And all he needed to do was come in and say, boy, this is starting to look like your mother's. I don't know if he meant that just like, yeah, it does. That's the way it is. Or whether he meant your house is, I don't know. But he'd say it, and I would say, no, it doesn't. I've been working hard, and I'm doing all this stuff over here because you did all that stuff for so many years, and, and I defend myself. And my sponsor said to change my lines there. She said, just agree with him. What? Talk about. And so I choked the words out one day. And we know ahead of time what somebody's going to say if you live together all those years. And all I said was he came in and said that, and I don't think he meant it critically, but I heard it that way. And I just said, yeah, it is a mess, isn't it? Well, of course, there wasn't any more discussion. And I was amazed at the freedom I felt. Do you know how much power you get when you don't argue with somebody? When you don't defend? I'll just let them be right. And not in a way that was guilty, just like, isn't that true? Now that's freedom. I wasn't getting freedom from making sure he understood what I wanted him to understand. I wasn't getting freedom from that. I was getting freedom, and I just let him think the worst, didn't matter. And he didn't think the worst, but I thought he did. That was so freeing, and those kind of choices now are the kind of things that helped me so much during the first parts of my program, till some of it became automatic. And I had to take an awful lot of actions while I was scared. That's something else. I would say, well, I'm scared to do that. And somebody would say, well, did you do it anyway? Well, wait a minute, we have to talk about this. If you're scared, you have to get over being scared before you do it. And she said, no, you don't. You just do it while you're scared. Wait a minute, that's backwards. First you study it. And you think, why am I so afraid? Why am I so afraid? And then won't feel scared. Well, most of the time, I had to do it the other way. And I had to take actions either I didn't want to take because it wasn't fair, or I had to take because it was better for me. It was better for me. And it's amazing again to me. I was constantly amazed in those days how freeing. I mean, there isn't anything left. You don't have to do anything more. Very powerful. The person who's quiet in a little argument or discussion, the person who's quietest, is the one with the power. Really, most of the time. And so I had to shut up. And after a while, I love just being quiet today. Never dreamed I would ever feel that way. because I'm obviously a blabbermouth, and our whole family are blabbermouths. And when we're together, we're rude, really, because everybody interrupts everybody else, and it's not very much fun for somebody else to be visiting, but we're fine like that, but it's not nice for other people. But it's just, and I just sit and listen, and I love it, and I don't have to have an opinion most of the time. I have some strong opinions, solid opinions, I should say, about the traditions of Al-Anon. And I was fortunate that I was able to be of service in Al-Anon in some of the ways that are available for any of us. And I began because a woman in Oceanside asked me to stand by the door and greet people at my first meeting in Oceanside. And I answered and said, I know how to do that. I was in a sorority, and we had receiving lines. And I have no idea what that woman thought, but I just thought, there's a place I can really do the job. Well, there were 12 people at the meeting usually, more or less, and very rarely a newcomer. And guess what? The next meeting, there's a newcomer. Gee, I wonder how that happened, and I'm the one to greet. So I said, hello, my name is Pat. And she said, my name is, and whatever it was, and she said, and I'm scared. And I said, so am I. I didn't even know I was going to say that. I didn't know I was scared. I was astonished that those words came out. And how did that happen? Because I was being a show-off, being of service, and what did I get? I got a gift. I hadn't been in a service setting. Those of you who've been on committees, we change personalities when we get into it. But I didn't know that yet. And they were going at it, and one of the nice ladies said, listen to us, we're not putting principles above personalities. She said, let's say the Serenity Prayer. And they had held hands, and they said the Serenity Prayer together. And they began again with their discussion. What happened to me was, I'm sure, a spiritual shift, because I didn't just have to understand that 12th tradition. I watched it happen. I really watched it happen. And it was very moving to me. And I just got very quiet, I'll tell you, and recognized that something important had just taken place for me. And one more time, I'd been of service to show off, to drive Millie, damn Millie, to the meeting, and, in San Diego, and I had kids to take care of, but I'll do it. And what did I get? I got one of the greatest gifts I've ever gotten, which was to really see that wonderful, powerful tradition at work. That's been the story of most of my recovery, because I've gotten to do a lot of service for Al-Anon, including, by the way, just because I'd like to tell you, including getting to be the delegate and getting to visit with Lois W. twice. I mean, 2 times, 1 year after the other, to pretty, a lot. And that's a gift. Wonderful woman, sweet. Well, I don't need to go into all that, but I mean, I never dreamed, and I didn't feel capable of doing that. I thought they'd made a big mistake out here to send me back there. I really didn't know what I was doing, and I mean it. I'm not being modest. I didn't know. And, but somebody else did, somebody up there. And I have had some experiences that were beyond my wildest dreams, not just in service, of course. The children's had their ups and downs. One of our kids got sober for some years and then got drunk again. You can't always know. I got kind of complacent, 12 years sobriety, and out she went, and then she's back now and has been for some time, but no guarantees. It's still a day at a time, even when they're sober and going to meetings. Still a day at a time. We've had things happen, a grandchild that died, and another one just very recently that fell and had a horrible accident, a teenager. It's damaged, he's damaged from it. And it was very scary. We didn't think he'd live. And another one, and that mother of that one has just finished going through a cancer treatment, a bad one, left with some serious after effects that are going to be permanent from the strong chemo they had to give her. And just the things, the things that life gives us, And then that alcoholic of mine had to go ahead and have a couple of heart attacks just to show off. Scared the poop out of me, I'll tell you. I said, wait a minute, I'm not ready for this yet. And so he stayed alive. That was nice. But you know, now he has some health problems, and we just kind of laugh at him. Hey, walking around with a cane. That's kind of fun, you know. I have to wait for him. I used to be the one behind, you know. Now I have to stand there and wait for him to catch up with me. I don't wish ill upon him, but I'll take what I can get. My mom found, when Cliff got sober, of course, kids were still doing what they were doing. And they were doing a lot of stuff, especially smelling musty. And I didn't know what that was. I really didn't know what that was for quite a while. But I kind of liked it. You know, they were so cool. They didn't argue. And, you know, teenagers can be terrible. And nobody argued with me. They said, sure, Mom. Okay, they didn't do anything I asked them to, but they said they would. It just kind of takes the edge off. And I liked it when they'd get those little white pills that kept them busy. And I've forgotten what they were, but, you know, I found some around. And they were, because they would do things for me then. They would do things. They would scrub my kitchen walls and clean the car and all night. And then they wouldn't go to school the next day, of course, because they all were, you know, in that shape. But it was okay with me because I learned how to take advantage of all those little moments. And Mom loved it there. We had parties. We sang around the piano with all this crazy people we knew. Many of them are in AA today, and a few could still be in AA, and many of them didn't need it, but they're still good friends. Most of our friends are in AA or Al-Anon today. Not entirely, but most of them. I eventually after I served as delegate, I went back to graduate school, and I certainly was the oldest one there, older than the teachers in some places, and I felt a little, oh my God, what am I doing? And so that I was able to get, it took me 4 or 5 years in order to get licensed in the state to do the kind of work I just had studied to do. Took me a while, I had to go through all that, and I've been doing that now for over about 25 years. And I can still do that, by the way, because I run my own place, and I don't care how old I am. No, they don't care how old I am. They don't pay any attention. They can't fire me because it's me. But that's been nice. That's been nice. And I'm grateful that I had Al-Anon that could give me the courage to do that. And that's, by the way, something I did while scared. You know, I said, what if I flunk? Well, then you flunk. You figure that wasn't a good idea. It makes it so simple. I didn't flunk. But it was spooky, and I know other people have done that. So, Mom, here we were. He's sober. We're not having the wild parties. The people that are coming and going are mostly AA and Al-Anon people. And Mom needs to drink again. She'd gone a little while. Of course she needs to drink again. She's a periodic. And one day she asked me, she said, why don't you go get us a bottle of wine? We'll relax. We've been working hard. Mom could get her own wine. She had a car that she could drive even with her bad hip. And I had been going to Al-Anon, and I answered her differently than I ever had in my life. Because I'd always either scolded her for drinking or I acted like it was just fine. No big deal. Sure, I'll get the wine. And this time I didn't. This time I said, Mom, she'd had a stroke too, and the doctor said that if you drank again, you're apt to have another stroke, and I just can't be the one to put the bottle in your hands. That was hard, but it was also not my doing. It came from somewhere else. It came from the meetings I'd been going to. Now, Mom didn't drink, but she didn't drink. She went a couple days, and Mom took her own life 2 days later. Now, that's just when the AA women come to me, because they were wonderful. Because AA women know what it's like to be an alcoholic woman, and better than any of us could know. And the people I'd known, especially Margie, were so helpful to me. And they would say to me things like, she wasn't comfortable drinking in this house anymore because that would have really declared her having a problem. Because we didn't have booze around, and nobody was drinking, and she would have had to make a real point to do that, to go buy it and sit there and drink. And since she had no problem, that would have made a statement that was past what she was willing to make. She also didn't believe she could live without alcohol. This is what they told me. We know she could have, but she didn't. So the only other way she could see was suicide. And I never for a minute felt that I caused that because I changed my lines. Mom, I knew she believed in suicide, so it wasn't like that was she always had thought that was okay to do. That was one of her beliefs. But what another gift I'd got It was so sad because, oh, she would have been a wonderful AA member. And she and Cliff got along beautifully. And she felt so bad when he didn't live at home anymore. She said, oh, poor Cliff. You know, I'm saying, what do you mean, poor Cliff? You know, when I kicked him out. It's poor Cliff, you know, not poor her daughter. But what a great woman. And there we are in Al-Anon and AA with all the people giving us the strength we needed when we needed it, very soon after we'd come in. So that I knew what to do with what had happened to my mom because of the loving AA women who sat with me and talked about what it was like and what it was like for them. Now, I couldn't ever fully identify, of course, but I could understand it so much better when I heard it from somebody who'd been there. Those are the things that happen with us, and those are the things we get through. When I was giving piano lessons and doing the things I was doing, one time a very talented little boy was playing, and he stopped and he looked up at the music and he pointed to something, a little series of grace notes. I don't know if anybody knows music in here, but a grace note is a tiny little note that comes just before the note you play. And it really is just a decorative thing. And it doesn't get a count, but it makes it prettier. It's a grace note. And he said, Miss Roche, what's that? And I said, oh, just ignore it. Does that tell you something about who I was? Oh, just ignore it. Ignore the grace note. Don't bother with that. That tells me a lot about who I was back then, a whole lot. But I want to tell you something. I don't ignore the grace notes today. They're all around us, and we all have them all the time. Even little telephones that ring have little grace note sounds to them. It's just a matter of slowing down and listening to them, or watching the things that are beautiful and pausing. And we have twin grandsons, 3 years old, and being with them and having them watch a little caterpillar and say, where's his knees, you know? And just taking the time to appreciate the little things that are there to appreciate. It's all because of my husband's deadly drinking and because I wouldn't let go and because I came to you and I had good people in my life who helped me so much. And thank you so much for inviting us here.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.